Hey there, so I previously did a video on sensation seeking. What is it? I'm one. How has it affected my life? You can check out the link to that video above, I'm sure. And at the end of it, I talked about how the negatives of being a sensation seeker has finally completely outweighed the positives. And specifically for me, the negatives is that I believe that being a sensation seeker has really kept me from getting into a long-term relationship, and it's also made the desire. It's kind of like screwed up my sex life. Let's just say that. Um, Sex gets boring, so I got to keep making it interesting, sort of thing. And those negatives were too much. And also, I saw a study that kind of said that sensation seekers have a tendency to get divorced. So knowing this information, knowing how it's affected me and how it could potentially affect me in the future, I thought I gotta see if there's a way I could stop this, end this horrible cycle. So I started doing some research. Some of the research I did was on love, because I figured, okay, well, if I'm not getting in a long-term relationship, let's look at the science of love. And really, it's a dopamine thing. Like, the way you fall in love is dopamine. You see someone, it sends you a rush. You want to be with that person because every time you do, you feel good. Every time you think about the person, you get a rush of dopamine. You're willing to drive long distances to see them. You're willing to put up with a whole bunch of crap to be with them, all because of this dopamine rush. The dopamine outweighs the negatives. But for me, I don't get to that point. Like, I have everything that a normal person sort of feels, I feel to a much less extent. So I am much easier turned off by someone. I'm not willing to, drive the distances. I just don't feel the same. And the same thing with sex, where, sex is designed in human beings, evolutionally speaking, to bind us together. Whereas sex gets boring for me very quickly. So I had to get rid of this if I had any sort of chance of having a normal life. And since love is the central part of falling in love is the dopamine, and the problem with being a sensation seeker has to do with dopamine, I thought that if I were going to address this chemically, I should look at drugs that affect one's dopamine cycle. And there are two classes of drugs that do that. They're the Parkinson's drugs, because Parkinson's is caused by a lack of dopamine. And then there's ADD medication, because focus has to do with dopamine. I decided to use go the ADD route for a couple of reasons. Because I'm an author, and focus is extremely important to me. I mean, to be a successful author, not like a Stephen King, but like a lower level successful author, you have to release books fairly frequently. And when I first became an author, I had just discovered the effects of vitamin D on me. And I started taking vitamin D right before I started writing, and my focus was really good at the time. But as time went on, the effects of the vitamin D wore off, and I would become distracted so much more easily that I had to come up with all these routines about, like, I couldn't check my text or my emails on a writing day, otherwise I could get completely distracted from it and not be able to write. I had all these things. I couldn't take phone calls, like all these things in order not to distract me, to keep me focused. But eventually, even that was not enough, and I had to start taking ginkgo for focus, and then that wasn't enough, and then I started taking fish oils, and again, I was back to normal, but then my body got adapted to that, and here I am again. So currently, up a couple of weeks ago, I noticed I'm writing a book right now. I just finished yesterday, yay! But I was writing a book, and I noticed that I was losing entire days when I should have been writing. Like, I would get a text, and it wasn't a negative text, it wasn't a bad text, it wasn't anything, but that text would so distract me that I would not be able to write a single word in the entire day. And even when I was writing, back in the day, I used to be able to write 5,000-6,000 words in a day, which is considered a lot. But I was having a hard time getting past 3,000 words, and my mind would just keep wandering the entire day. So I thought, okay, well, if I was going to take any sort of medication, ADD is the medication I should be taking, because that has to do with focus. Which medication? There are three different types of medications. There's the Riddle main ones. There's a couple of more, but there's three main ones, popular ones, which is Ritalin, Adderall, and Vyvanse. There's some other ones. But I was kind of within there, so I researched those, and I saw that Vyvanse was associated with binge eating, like in the negative. So they did a study that showed that people who took Vyvanse at a certain dosage dramatically decreased the amount of binge eating that they did. Dramatically. And from my research as a sensation seeker, I know that that is one of the ways that that expresses oneself as a sensation seeker, because when you eat food, it releases dopamine. So a person who is constantly searching for a higher dose of dopamine will continue to eat because it releases dopamine. So that was one thing. That was a trait the sensation seekers had that Vyvanse kind of addressed. And I already knew from everything else that when you take these sort of medications, there's a tendency to abuse alcohol, because when you take these medications, alcohol has less of an effect on you, right? So let's say that you don't realize this. You decide you want to go out drinking. You drank the way you drank before you started taking these drugs, and then you start drinking, and you used to, like, a certain level, you get buzzed, you get sort of drunk after all this stuff. You don't feel those things, so you drink more, like going after those things. Then after a while, you don't realize that you way overdrank. You're nearing poisoning yourself just because all your signals are off. So I knew that it decreases the effects of alcohol. So the drugs decreases the effects of alcohol, all of them do, and Vyvanse is associated with a reduction in binge eating. So I was like, oh, these are both sensation-seeking things. I'll do the Vyvanse.